Dr. C.Rangarajan, Chairman of the Economic Advisory Council to PM. He joins us live from New Delhi. Dr. Rangarajan, good morning and thank you for joining us. Dr. Rangarajan, we have a print of 4.4% on India's GDP, which has now plunged to a fresh 5-year low, and many experts are of the view that this is just the tip of the iceberg, because the real pain point for Indian economy will get captured in Q2 GDP data because of rupee and crude.
Well, the Q1 data is not very encouraging, but I see that the economy will pick up in the second half of the year. After all, a number of measures have been taken in the last 6 or 7 months. The full impact of that will be felt more particularly in the second half of the year. I also agree that Q2 may not necessarily show any great improvement. But beginning the second half of the year, we must see the impact of whatever we have done, whatever actions that have been taken. Certainly, you will also see in Q3 and Q4 the impact of the better monsoon and better agricultural output. In fact, in the first quarter, the agricultural growth was only about 2.7%, but everybody is agreed that for the year as a whole, the agricultural growth will be anywhere between 4 to 5%. In fact, some people even estimated in excess of 5% as a growth rate. Therefore, all of that will be felt in Q3 and Q4, and therefore I am disappointed with the Q1 number, but I'm still hopeful that the overall growth rate of the economy can be higher than last year.
Dr. Rangarajan, good morning. Your point that agriculture will do better in FY14 is well taken, but its contraction in industry and sooner and later services also getting impacted is a bigger worry at this point. There is also a fear that the government may be forced to cut expenditure if subsidies go out of hand. Does it look likely to you?
Well, the improved agriculture will also have an impact upon storage and other services sector. Therefore, you should expect the impact of the increase in rural demand on industry also in Q3 and Q4. Therefore, agriculture still plays a very important part as far as generating a rural demand is concerned. Yes, there has been a decline in industrial, particularly in manufacturing, but I expect that there will be forces operating which will reverse this trend, and you will get into the positive territory in Q3 and Q4. I have mentioned earlier to you also on one of the occasions that there is a focused attention on improving the production and capacity creation targets in some of the key infrastructure sectors that lie in the public domain, such as coal, power, roads and railways. Focused attention will be paid on these areas, and therefore the public sector may act as a stimulant of economic activity in the current year. As far as government expenditures are concerned, I do believe that the present situation does warrant adjustment in some of the administered prices. That will be the way to go rather than cut the government expenditures from the budgeted levels. We should try to keep the government expenditures at the budgeted level, and including the subsidies, and therefore any other adjustment that is required in order to keep the subsidies at the budgeted level will have to be undertaken.
So you don't think the government fiscal maths for FY14 is under threat because of the weakness in currency?
I think it makes it more difficult. That is obvious. But then necessary adjustments on the subsidies side will have to be made in order to ensure that the fiscal deficit emerges at the budgeted level. I think the finance minister has repeatedly said that is some benchmark which he would not like to deviate from.
Dr. Rangarajan, is there a case for RBI to reverse some of the tightening and partial capital control measures soon, because they don't seem to be serving the purpose anymore when it comes to currency volatility?
Well, the Reserve Bank of India was in the direction of easing the policy. They took a pass last time on 2 occasions, I think, because of the external sector considerations. But as the stability returns to the foreign exchange market, it is possible for the Reserve Bank to change its stance. But I think we need to see a little more stability in the foreign exchange market. I believe the capital flows will also come back to the market. Therefore, it may take a little time. But once the stability returns to the foreign exchange market, the Reserve Bank can move in the direction of easing the stance.
Can it get stability anytime soon, Dr. Rangarajan? I mean, the rupee hit an all-time low of 68.56 thereabouts. We've stabilized somewhat around the 66 mark. But do you think a possibility of things worsening in Syria, them actually leading to oil prices going to a tizzy, unfavorable outcome from the FOMC as well later this month, again take things out of hand?
No, I think the impact of the expected measures is already felt in the foreign exchange market. I do not see any further great shocks in the foreign exchange market. The expectation of the easing of the tapering off of the quantitative easing is already digested by the market, and that is already reflected in the market. And therefore now the investors will have to think as to what they should be doing going ahead. And I believe that in that situation, to some extent, the capital flows will return rather than retreat. And in that case, the stability will return to the market. And to answer directly your question, I expect the stability to come to the market in the next few weeks.
Dr. Rangarajan, a lot of portfolio investors I've personally interacted with in the last 10 days are of the view that the two bills which the government has, Lok Sabha has approved, a food security bill and the new land acquisition bill, they smack of populism. They will do very little to increase India's GDP. In fact, they will only dent the government balance sheet going forward.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, there are several objectives before the government. And one of the objectives is also fiscal consolidation. The impact of any measure that has been taken by the government in terms of the fiscal consolidation has to be met. And that is why I am saying that the commitment to the reduction in the fiscal deficit in the current year and taking it forward in the same direction is extremely important in order to impart confidence. Therefore, the specific legislations they are unique to a particular country. Why these legislations are warranted in a particular country is determined by the domestic set of factors. But what the rating agencies and what the investors outside would look for is the impact of it on the fisc. And so long as we are able to maintain the fiscal deficit at the budgeted level and take it down as it has been indicated in the roadmap, then I think it will reassure the rating agencies and the investors.
Dr. Rangarajan, the finance minister is pretty confident that the current account deficit will be less than $70 billion in FY14. But don't you think hardening crude prices and exports not really taking off as hoped could spoil this math for him?
Exports are picking up. I mean, I don't think exports are not picking up. Exports are picking up. But the impact of the depreciation on exports itself will be felt after some time. On the import side, I do believe that the fairly substantial increase in the imported price in rupee terms will have some effect. Certainly, I do expect that the import of gold will come down. The July numbers clearly indicated that it has been coming down. And therefore, the impact on gold import itself could be of the order of $10 billion. That is a reduction in the import by $10 billion. Therefore, from 88 to go to 70, I do not see that as a impossibility. In fact, I think it is quite possible and very much possible to reduce it to $70 billion.
Is there a need to revisit subsidies, especially on oil front? Because there seems to be a strong case for a one-time steep diesel price hike, because certainly 12 rupees plus per litre under recovery is not quite sustainable.
Well, given the international price on crude and the depreciation of the rupee, the adjustment, the domestic prices of diesel becomes absolutely essential. Therefore, the adjustments, the sooner the adjustments made, the better, and I expect that action will be taken.
Right, Dr. Rangarajan, let me quote the State Bank of India chairman here. And State Bank of India chairman last Saturday indicated to ET Now that the inquiry from private sector for fresh loans has dried up completely. That is some kind of an indication of how bad the private sector sentiment towards manufacturing is. So if private sector capex does not make a comeback, what will help capital formation? Because ultimately it's the entrepreneurial capital which has to make a comeback.
Well, it has to come back. There are 2 or 3 things that you need to note in this context. Even the latest numbers on even on the quarterly data of GDP indicates that the gross capital formation rate was something like 29% of the GDP. Therefore, 29% of the GDP as the gross capital formation rate is not a low rate. In fact, given the normal incremental capital output ratio of 4:1, it should give us close to 7 or 7.5% growth rate. Therefore, while investments have come down, they still remain at a reasonably high level. Certainly, most of these investments may be happening on projects that have already been initiated. Perhaps new projects are not coming in as at the desired extent. That we really need to be cautious about, because this will affect the economy going down the lane. But secondly, as I mentioned, there are key public sector investments projects. If all effort is made to fulfill the capacity creation targets in these sectors by the government, with the money already allotted in the budget, that would provide another stimulus for investment levels.
Dr. Rangarajan, earlier you were reiterating to the fact that you feel that the currency is going to stabilize in the next few weeks. We've already hit 68 plus levels on the currency. What, according to you, is a stable level?
No. I think stable has essentially meaning that at any level it remains more or less at that point. I mean, it could stabilize at any level. Now, for example, we have the level of 65, 66. If the market behaves in such a way that it stabilizes around that level, it is stability. Stability has to be distinguished from other things. Stability essentially means that there are no violent fluctuations around the level that we are seeing.
So how does one define the real level of rupee? Because Mr. Mayaram and Finance Minister, they've explicitly indicated last week that Indian currency is fairly undervalued.
Well, one way of looking at it is to take a base year and see whether the real effective exchange rate from that base year has appreciated or depreciated. If you look at it in terms of the 2004-5 as a base, the 6 currency basket as well as the 36 currency basket of the Reserve Bank of India clearly show that whatever overvaluation that might have been there has been completely corrected. So that is one way of looking at it. But what the level would be depends, as you know, on the current account deficit and the capital flows. So from a level which could be regarded as reasonably stable, such as the one that prevailed in 2004-5, one could argue that the necessary correction has been made.
Dr. Rangarajan, when we started today's interview or today's interaction, your view was that Indian economy will recover in the second half of this financial year. So what could be a key risk to your call of a second half recovery? What could go wrong? What could challenge a possible second half recovery which you are so confident of?
Well, the external factors are unpredictable. One really hopes that things will remain peaceful, will remain normal, and the global situation will not in any way worsen. And I'm also saying that there are now signs of the advanced economies picking up. Certainly, the growth rate of the United States in the second quarter has been encouraging. But if there is a deterioration in the performance of the external sector, that would be one downside risk. So that is one of the major things that could spoil the faster recovery.
Dr. Rangarajan, really appreciate you taking the time out and speaking with us.